I'm not totally sure where actually can make sense for both parties to come to a deal. The location that makes sense in theory for James Harden is the Clippers. The problem is the Clippers have Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. They're probably not going to move both of those guys or either of those guys. And then beyond them, they don't really seem to have any assets that actually make sense for the Philadelphia 76ers. Terrence Mann would be a nice acquisition. There are pick assets. There are other things that they could go get. But those don't actually tick boxes, in my opinion, for the Philadelphia 76ers next season, trying to win a championship with Joel Embiid, the MVP of the league, as their best player and centerpiece. Do you understand? Let's start with this before we move forward. Do you understand why the Clippers would want James Harden? Let's just go base level here, and then we'll move out.
Yeah, I think not to go too long, but I think my thing with this is I think some people have gone a little bit too far in degrading what the Clippers roster is, but I do think it's kind of a midpoint of 2 years ago. It felt like everybody's saying, oh, that they have almost too many guys because they have so much versatility and all these multi-positional players. And I think part of the issue is some of those guys have aged out. Some of them haven't developed the way that you'd think. Some of them have regressed a little bit. And now I think they're in an awkward spot of like they have too many guys who do the same thing without really giving them a new look. So to me, if you can cobble some of that together into James Harden, does it answer the injury questions you have? Definitely not. Does it necessarily fix everything for you? I don't think so, but I think it gives you you have somebody who can really create in the half court, which granted, Paul George and Kawhi can of course do that. But I think when you're talking about somebody who can create in the half court for themselves and others at not just like a good level, at a great level, borderline, depending on the day, I think that makes a ton of sense. But I think when you're talking about money and what the Sixers actually want, that's where it gets a little bit dicier.
I just don't totally. That's where I'm struggling, just like generally trying to find a deal that the Sixers could potentially want. And we'll talk about, maybe a couple of ideas that
Can I give a take on that?
Yes, but hold on.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, I definitely want your take. It's just like I want to kind of go in a flow here a little bit. Because the Clippers are the spot that it seems like everyone wants to end up. Like James Harden wants to end up there, and I think that's the place we have to start on some level. Is there a deal that you think one-on-one with the Clippers that could make sense? Because the best deal for my eyes that they could offer is Norman Powell, probably, I guess, Robert Covington, maybe probably Robert Covington. But no, you probably want Powell, Terrence Mann, Kobe Brown, and really probably like that's it. Maybe a pick in the future, right? Because they can move one of their picks, I think 2028. Does that do anything for you if you are the Philadelphia 76ers?
I'm hanging up the phone, to be honest. Like that, to me, that's like, and I know some people will look at it and be like, well, maybe you can make a counter move off of that. I just think like if you're doing that, then we're talking.
So that becomes a 3-team deal then.
Well, yeah,
and that's like
a different. But exactly. But I mean, like later in the year after their restrictions are up. I think my thing is I look at that. I'm like, all right, if we're making that deal, then we may as well just trade Joel at this point, because maybe that sounds like too much, but I think based on all the signalings we've gotten and how Joel has, and I'm not saying Joel's right or wrong, but just based on anything that he said, and I think maybe a little too much got made out of what he said, but at the same point, Joel knows what he's doing. He's smart. He knows what he's doing in the media. And I just think that's such a downgrade with not that they couldn't be successful with a group that's maybe a little bit deeper with less of the top end talent and, Maxey takes a step. But I think when you're talking about what the actual ceiling is with that group, I mean, that does nothing for me.
So yeah, that's kind of where I struggle with this too. Let's just ask the question here. Is there a chance that a Norman Powell, Tyrese Maxey, Terrence Mann, Tobias Harris, Joel Embiid closing lineup is in any way better than what Philly had this year?
Probably not.
I don't think so either. I think it'd be very unlikely. You can throw in D'Anthony Melton, obviously, into that mix, depending on the matchups. You can throw in Pat Bev if you think he's going to be valuable for them this year. PJ Tucker could go back in this deal, and you could, do an expiring. You could do like the flip of PJ Tucker for Robert Covington if you wanted to try and get off of some money quicker with PJ Tucker. You get the expiring deal of Covington. You make the Clippers take on the extra year of Tucker. That's at least like something of a value add to me. But the problem is exactly what you said. I think that deal ends up resulting in Joel Embiid being like, what are we doing here? And probably asking out at a certain point, because that's what stars do at the end of the day. If they can't compete for a title, and Joel Embiid is getting very close to being 30 years old and he just won MVP, he should want to win a title coming up here. And the 76ers, if they have all of these players and everything like that, they have to figure out a way to make it work, I think. And you could maybe do this deal for Harden. You could do Terrence Mann and Norm Powell and Kobe Brown in a first or whatever. And then you could try and move Tyrese Maxey maybe to go get a different star. I think like that could be on the table somehow. You'd probably do it all in like a 3 or 4 team swap if you were trying to really make that happen. But I don't know if that's a good idea. Like, again, Tyrese Maxey's really good at basketball. He's probably going to be like a top 60 player in the league this year. Trading him does not make you better. Trading him gives you another hole to plug. So I'm struggling to find the Clippers deal that makes sense. There's probably some weird 3-team construction out there where you could find a star. And that, I think, is what I'm interested in exploring. Trying to find a way to get a star to Philadelphia. The problem is I can't find that star right now. Are you and I in agreement that the Philadelphia 76ers should go into this season with James Harden on the roster unless they are able to find a commensurate star that is somewhat close to James Harden's value in a trade?
I think ideally you start the season with that not being the problem. But at the same point, I just don't think that you can, I think if you just make kind of a putt instead of actually trying to go for a drive here, then I just question what that ends up looking like long term. So I think you kind of have to, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think you have to too. You really, I think, run the risk of Joel Embiid saying, I want out, if you end up with a team of like, all due respect to Terrence Mann, a guy that I've loved pre-draft, that I've loved every moment that he's been in the league. Terrence Mann, you can't expect him to be the centerpiece of a James Harden deal when you are trying to compete for a title immediately.
And respectfully too, like I really like Terrence Mann. I think he's a good player. I think that there were times that he could have been better utilized last year after seeing how well he played the year before. At the same time, we got to recognize he's going to turn 28 this year. This is not a dude on a rookie scale deal. And that's not to say that he can't get better or won't get better. I think he has a real upside to become like a real solid starter. But that's kind of the point. Like, I think he's been talked about, and this is, again, not meant to shade, but like he's been talked about like he can be the centerpiece of this kind of deal. And I just don't see that, to be honest. I think that's a little bit ridiculous.
Terrence Mann,
respectfully, but
Terrence Mann is a worse asset than Jaime Jaquez right now. You get Jaime Jaquez for 4 years on a rookie scale deal. You get Terrence Mann for 2 years at $22 million.
I'm blowing up on Jaime. I don't think Jaime is going to be as good as Terrence is right now. So I think he will be at his peak. He won't be for 2 years probably. Well, yeah, but I think if I'm a championship, a team that wants to be a contender, I think Terrence means a lot more to me than Jaime Jaquez.
Yeah, I agree. I'm just saying, like, in comparison to the other big trade that's out there, the Damian Lillard trade,
that's fair.
Where people are, complaining about Jaime Jaquez being the centerpiece. Well, Jaime Jaquez is, to me at least, a better trade asset than Terrence Mann is. Terrence Mann's a better player than Jaime Jaquez. It's just that as an asset where you get 4 years of a rookie scale deal for Jaime Jaquez, that is a more valuable player to me. So I want to go through this and I want to try and find a way, or maybe let's do this. Try and find a star that could realistically, theoretically be on the market in a potential James Harden trade construction that gets Philadelphia the player it needs and gets the Clippers James Harden and find something. So just running through teams here, right? The Atlanta Hawks just signed DeJounte Murray to an extension. He is not tradable. They're not going to move Trae Young in a construction like this. Doesn't really, none of the Hawks guys make sense, right?
Correct.
The Boston Celtics, Jaylen Brown just signed an extension, not tradable. Jason Tatum, not moving Jason Tatum in a James Harden trade construction. The Celtics do not make sense. I think the Celtics, if they're going for any point guard, should be trying in some way, shape, or form to get involved in the Damian Lillard sweepstakes. I'm skeptical that they will even do that, though, given the price tag involved in that. Right?
Yeah.
Okay. The Brooklyn Nets, I think, would theoretically be like a somewhat interesting trade partner here. The problem is that the trade partner is the Brooklyn Nets, who already had James Harden and already had to move him. I would substantially doubt that they want to get back in that business. They are going to be out here. The Charlotte Hornets, they're rebuilding. They have no need to get involved in a James Harden sweepstakes. They probably don't want the assets that the Clippers can give. I don't really see a construction there that makes sense. I do at least think that there is something interesting about Gordon Hayward involved in this going back to Philly, but I don't think you can really expect Gordon Hayward health in any way, shape, or form. And I don't think he can be the main piece that you're expecting to win now with in such a deal. Right?
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
Okay. Now we're into one that I actually find interesting. Is there a way to do a DeMar DeRozan to Philly, some assets to Chicago, James Harden to LA deal?
I don't. That's tough. Because I'm just trying. I mean, I think that that's better than what the LA deal is for sure. Like DeMar is a fantastic player, does a lot of really good things that I think would be good for the Sixers. But at the same time, I mean, I think it's at least palatable, which it's not great. I would like to see what else there is for sure.
So we're going to go through this. I think DeMar is the name that makes the most sense personally. Okay. But the problem here is that I think Chicago has a warped view of its roster and correct. Probably would be interested in continuing to have DeMar DeRozan on the team. The interesting thing to me is is there a chance that Chicago could just want James Harden and see him as a better fit on an expiring contract for this roster than DeMar DeRozan?
I don't think that's crazy.
Is there a chance that they go, hey, we think a core with James Harden, Zach LaVine, Pat Williams, Nikola Vucevic, Alex Caruso, Kobe White makes more sense than a LaVine, DeRozan, Vucevic, Patrick Williams core does for this upcoming season?
I think part of what could be interesting in that, because and this is respectfully, I'm not I don't think that that's a contending team or whatever, but I think it's a team if things hit right, okay, Pat takes another step and Vooch shoots well from three again for a whole season, okay, maybe there's some stuff there. Right. But because all right, you're kind of forcing Zach to play a little bit more off the ball, which I think both of us would say is where not that he's a bad on-ball player, but I think when he is able to be a player who's really playing in the flow of an offense, hell yeah. I think my biggest question would just be, what is the confidence level in James with Vooch? Because that is not a kind of player that he's ever really succeeded with. Honestly, the closest big he's probably played with to Vooch is Joel, and those are completely different players. like in terms of just somebody who is much more of like a pop than a roll guy. And Vooch is way more pop. And I think like you're doing a lot more stuff with him as a handoff hub. And that's just, again, that is very much not James's game. But again, like, okay, well, let's say, well, they can't even trade Vooch for however long. So that automatically makes it interesting. But yeah, I mean, like, it's not, with how the Bulls have operated, I don't think that that's insane.
So I think that it's interesting insofar as if they do care about getting Pat Williams more touches and seeing what he is before committing to a larger extension with him, getting rid of DeMar and allowing Pat Williams to be in spots that are better for him, because he's a guy that I think can be a real mid-range shot creator, a guy you can throw the ball to, high post, mid post, on the wing, everything like that, and let him create shots that way. Exploring that, I think, is actually the biggest question in understanding what his untapped upside and untapped potential is. So I'm intrigued by that idea, at least, right?
Yeah, no, I think that there is interest in that, because again, like, part of the issue for this team is ball movement. Like, I'm not even part of it. Like, that is the biggest issue with this Bulls team, has been ball movement. It's not that they don't have offensive players. Again, like, part of that has been a lack of floor spacing, but I think a lot more of it is just in general the shooting on the team. Because even like if you go back to, and we're going a ways back, but if you go back to when Thad Young was on this team and they played through him, like, this team had great ball movement. They didn't have the talent to really be a super successful offense, but like, you had a lot of the same pieces doing some of this stuff before DeMar and Vooch came in. So it's like, I don't know, like, it's very much at a point where it's like, if you can have somebody who is, not that, I mean, DeMar has technically been the primary initiator on the team, but I think if you have somebody who is making it much less my turn, your turn, and more just, hey, it's my turn and we're figuring it out off of that. Obviously, that's a very simplified way of looking at it, but like, I think that, I mean, maybe there's something there that at least makes me say, like, hey, maybe the Bulls are a playoff team. Probably, I mean, almost definitely not a home court, but yeah, I'm with you. I think that getting somebody who is like a legitimately very good playmaker and passer that the team hasn't had in prior years would be really big for them.
Does DeMar in any way make sense for Philadelphia?
I think yes and no. I think my question would just be, how much faith do you have in Tyrese Maxey taking more steps as a playmaker? Because to me, he is obviously different from Zach LaVine, but I think part of what makes him so successful is being that guy who can attack second side, being that guy who can really operate, with his athleticism and attacking off the catch. And I think if you are bringing in DeMar, somebody who very much succeeds in the same way, but in that same, he operates in a very different way, obviously, like a lot more slowed down in his game, but like a lot of what he does is having the ability to operate and attack off stuff. So are you confident in Joel taking a step as a passer? Are you confident in Tyrese taking a much larger step as an on-ball playmaker? And I think that's asking a lot. And to be fair, like, DeMar does really good things with ball in his hand, but it's different.
The only thing that worries me there is the idea of DeMar and Joel loving that like mid-post area. And loving to, like, it'd be the most hideous offense in the league, like by far. Like, it'd be even uglier than like with Harden being there. And I think that Philly fans would not love that. But I think that it's the most palatable option because DeMar is still really good at basketball. And if you're just like exchanging and expiring for an expiring, I think you could make sense to argue that the Bulls, this helps them honestly maybe like evaluate their players and rebuild while also contending at a better level. And maybe DeMar is happier to go and play in like a contending situation for a year as opposed to the Bulls. That at least, like, I can come up with a world in my mind where that makes some sense for both sides. But it's hard for me to envision Chicago being willing to do that as well. I don't know. I'm intrigued by it, but Chicago seems to be in such a weird spot that it's difficult for me to imagine. Just because I just they don't do logical things there, it feels like.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
Okay. The Cleveland Cavaliers, the Dallas Mavericks, the Denver Nuggets, none of those three teams really make sense in a Harden construction, in my opinion. The Cavs and Dallas both have just like crazy elite point guards, and they have two of them. The Nuggets are just not going to be involved in a Harden deal, in my opinion. The Pistons, look, I mean, the Pistons do weird things. They have Cade Cunningham and Jaden Ivey, though, so I can't imagine the Pistons wanting to do this weird thing specifically, right?
Yeah, no, definitely not.
They also have Monte Morris. They probably want to get Asar Thompson some reps. They probably want to get Marcus Sasser some reps. I don't think they're in the market for a point guard. I don't see Golden State being involved in a James Harden deal, although the Chris Paul contract is somewhat intriguing here, in my opinion. And this is where I wonder if we could get a bit creative. Is there a world where the Golden State Warriors would like turning Chris Paul's contract into Terrence Mann, maybe not Norm Powell, but like Terrence Mann,
like
I'm
Nick
trying to
Batum.
think of, like maybe Nick Batum and like a first. Like, is that plausible?
I think it's plausible, but like, and again, maybe I'm reading too much into stuff, but it feels like they seem pretty dead set on CP to an extent, or not. Maybe dead set is the wrong way to put it, but it feels like they've moved forward with it. Like, this is our thing. This is what we're doing. Could be wrong on that, but I mean, I think that it's something to think about for sure. I don't know. What's your read on that?
Does Chris Paul tick the boxes for the 76ers? Could you do like Chris Paul and Norm Powell to the 76ers? You send back Harden and Tucker to the Clippers, and then the Clippers send like Terrence Mann, probably would have to be like Marcus Morris maybe to the Warriors, and then like Kobe Brown in a first or something to the Warriors. Like, is that something that makes sense?
Sort of. Like,
it's not far off, I don't think. But again, do you think for the 76ers, Chris Paul and Norm Powell makes them a better team than James Harden did last year, or makes them like an equal team in some way?
I don't think so.
Is that a better idea than DeMar DeRozan?
Probably not. Just by virtue of Chris being another year older, the injury factor, and especially too, it's like even less about that and more just like we already asked a lot of Joel defensively last year, and now we want him to cover for Tyrese and CP. Like, that's a lot. So I don't know, that would be interesting to see how that looks.
The interesting thing for me is that I think the Warriors would look higher. I think they would like to maybe use the Chris Paul deal over the next 18 months to be able to turn, or 12 months maybe, to be able to turn that not into multiple smaller contracts, but more likely multiple bigger contracts, or not multiple bigger contracts, like a single player in that salary slot, much in the same way they did with like D'Angelo Russell, turning that into Andrew Wiggins. And using the Russell contract essentially as like a salary slot for half a year. I would bet that's more the route they go down. That makes a little bit more sense to me. But there's a world where you can envision that, I think. I'm basically trying to come up with worlds that you can come up with, basically. And it's not the easiest thing in the world. The Houston Rockets, I just don't see it with them signing Fred VanVleet. I'm sorry. Like, I would be surprised if they really go down this road. I do not see the Indiana Pacers going down the road of a Harden situation in any way. I don't see the Pacers having like the guy that makes sense for the 76ers. The Lakers, I guess you could theoretically maybe try to come up with something, but I don't think they have the guy that the 76ers are looking for outside of AD and LeBron, and I don't see that happening anytime soon. The Grizzlies, I don't see them really trying to get involved here. Do you?
No, I don't think it really makes a lot of sense for them, to be honest, with where they're at. And nah, I don't see it.
The Heat, I don't think they have the guy that the Sixers should want. They could obviously look to Harden as like a backup option if they don't get Lillard, but I don't think they have the guy that like makes sense for Philly to acquire. The question is, if you're, I guess, Miami, do you care more about Tyler Hero or getting James Harden for a year?
Probably a Hero, just because.
I would rather have Hero.
Yeah. No, yeah, I'm just thinking through my head. But yeah, no, I'd probably go Hero.
Yeah, I think I'd rather have Hero than Harden on an expiring. The Bucks, it seems like they're going in like a different direction, just in terms of finding a different way to play. Like some of the moves they've made over the course of the last couple of years are non-Budenholzer moves, and obviously Mike Budenholzer is not going to be there. Like you look, they draft Marjon Beauchamp, they draft Andre Jackson, right? These are non-shooters where they've played a scheme that almost expressly only values shooters, right? So could they like look down the road of a James Harden acquisition? I think no. I think they would try and get involved in Lillard, and I have sent you a monstrosity that
I don't want to think about that ever ever again in my life.
Yeah, that like I can try and come up with in my head that makes sense, but I don't see it. I don't see the Bucks getting involved in a James Harden deal. I don't think they would move Drew Holiday. I think Drew Holiday is a guy that the Sixers could want. I don't think that the Bucks would move Drew Holiday in a James Harden construction. I think they'd consider it for Lillard. I don't think they would do it for Harden. The Timberwolves, again, I think that you can come up with like an interesting case like for Mike Conley and something else, but I don't think they would do that. I think the Timberwolves probably want to just see what James Hart or see what Mike Conley and Rudy Gobert can come up with in terms of synergy, and then let Anthony Edwards cook. Because if you go get James Harden, you're taking the ball out of Anthony Edwards' hands, and I think they want to explore that a little bit more. Right?
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
Okay. The New Orleans Pelicans are a team that a couple of people in the comments have brought up. Seasons and Sloan just asked about the Pelicans. The idea of CJ McCollum in something like this is intriguing. I think the idea of CJ McCollum for 3 years is probably something that the Pelicans wouldn't mind getting off of that contract. And I think that the Sixers might not want that contract, just given that they might have to rebuild pretty quickly. I also don't love the CJ and Tyrese Maxey fit. Someone brought up, I think McCollum and Dyson Daniels could make sense. Maybe. I think it's a good idea. I think like it's an idea in theory, but why would we want James Harden in New Orleans?
I wouldn't personally really want James Harden in New Orleans. Like I just think in terms of like, yes, I think that this team is very much on the brink of saying they have to make a move is too much. But I think with where they're at roster wise, like I really think that it's not Dame and it's not, the quote unquote guy right now, but I think that they are the team to really go for the next guy potentially if things really hit right this year. And so to me, I would not be making the hard move because I do think he would make them meaningfully better. But when you consider, again, like we just talked about, it's on an expiring, how likely is that he's going to re-sign in New Orleans when everything has been about wanting to go back to LA? So no, I would be very against that for them.
I would also be somewhat against it for them. I think they should be waiting to cash in on something else. I think their opportunity cost is using some of their assets on something else, as opposed to this move. And I think it just doesn't really make sense to do that. The Knicks, I think the Knicks are waiting. I think the Knicks Like the Knicks are much more likely to me to try and get Embiid after this whole thing falls apart than to try and get James Harden now, right? They have Jalen Brunson. Like you don't need to do that. The Oklahoma City Thunder, I think there's no chance they would go down that road with Shea and Josh and all those guys. The Orlando Magic, I mean, maybe,
I think
right?
that there's some like I kind of see that with them. Like I get the vision. I don't think that they have any interest in that. Is where I would be at, and I don't think that they should either. Like they have so much to be excited about with their young group, and it feels like they're just kind of all in on that. And I'll put out a take. You know me, I don't do takes. I think that this team, I believe they're slated by Vegas for 36.5. Is there over under? I'm taking the over on wins for them next year. I don't think that is egregious or all that bullish, honestly. Like they won 34 last year. They played at about a 500 pace after Christmas, or after January 1st, not after Christmas, because they lost 2 games after Christmas. But I mean, right after Christmas. But point being, like I think they have like so many guys that they're interested in figuring out as ball handlers that I don't really think it makes all that much sense, even if I get the idea of, taking them up a level next year.
Markelle Fultz, Gary Harris, Cole Anthony for James Harden.
I'm just trading Joel Embiid.
I think the Fultz back in Philly thing is potentially the funniest outcome
that
possible.
Would be hilarious.
There's no way that it would happen.
But also, Markelle's agent would do bad
not
things.
Be pleased.
Yeah.
Not be pleased. Yeah, look, if they just drafted Anthony Black. They still have Jalen Suggs on the roster. If they would want to have like an expiring point guard with the way that Markelle played last year, I think they should continue to go down the Markelle road. I don't really think they should try and like expedite this in any way.
Yeah.
If there is a world where Jeff Weltman in some way, shape, or form is in like job security trouble, maybe you could say that like they try to get James Harden and try and get to like 43 wins this year instead of 38 or so and make the playoffs and do things that way. I don't really love it personally, but a team that I can't rule out necessarily given that. The Phoenix Suns, there's just no way that they can make this work. The Portland Trailblazers, I mean, there's probably a Damian Lillard construction out there, but I've yet to find the Damian Lillard to Philly construction that works. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I've really tried to figure it out.
Yeah. And obviously because I mean, it wouldn't be Harden back, obviously, but like that, yeah, I'm with you. I don't, that the monstrosity you sent me feels like the closest to it. And even then you can like pick at it and find reasons for it to not happen.
The Kings have De'Aaron Fox. There's no way that they're doing that. And they don't have another star outside of Domantas Sabonis. Domantas Sabonis is the center. He does not fit with Joel Embiid. The Toronto Raptors are realistically the last team that I think are worth talking about here. Is there any way that they could decide a James Harden, Pascal Siakam, Jakob Poeltl, like Scotty Barnes core with Harden works? Like moving Anunoby and Gary Trent and trying to build around Harden, Siakam, Barnes.
And I know it's not as simple as just we have no shooters now. Like there are still guys who are going to shoot, and they did a little bit to add some shooting on the roster. Like obviously, getting Grady Dick in there, but that just feels like such a weird roster to put James Harden on. And honestly, it's weird enough that I'd really like to see it happen. I like just from the like visualizing it standpoint, not from the actual like front office standpoint. Like I would not be super in on it, on doing it as the Raptors. But
yeah, I think there's just no way they would move Anunoby for Harden, frankly. And the only way that Philly could do it is if they get Anunoby, I think. Mm-hmm. There's no way they're moving OG for him. I think if you could do it without moving OG, that makes some sense, but I don't really see it. And then Utah, I don't see them going out and getting James Harden while they're in the middle of trying to rebuild. They are a team that theoretically could use a guard, but I don't think they're moving Markkanen, and that's really the only guy that like helps Philly in any way, shape, or form. So realistically, the closest thing we've got is this DeMar deal. And I don't see it, which means I don't see a deal for James Harden on the market. Like we tried to get creative here to find some stuff for Harden that makes sense. Like you can come up with like maybe a Golden State construction where they turn the Chris Paul deal into something that makes sense. But yeah, I just don't see it. I do not see it. Do you?
No, not really. I'm with you. I don't really see it either.
Yeah, I do not. I've tried very hard. I don't see it. I think they should go into the season with James Harden on the roster and see what happens and see if anything opens up later. Maybe a DeMar construction opens up later in the year when Philly or when Chicago's like out of the construction and like out of the contention is the word I'm looking for. Maybe you can do that, but I don't see it. I don't see a deal that makes Joel Embiid happy. And unfortunately, where I think this is going is this is setting up for Joel to like potentially ask for something else.
Yeah, no, I agree. It feels very much like it's headed that way, which is what makes it interesting to look at the teams that could be eyeing's the wrong way to put it, but the teams that could be in position to make the move for Embiid is really interesting to think about. And I don't want to make it just seem like we're trying to get him out of Philly, but legitimately that does feel like where it's headed.
I think that there is a chance that happens for sure. TMNT asks, could the new owner make a move? So essentially new owner syndrome in Charlotte make a deal for Harden? Maybe, but I don't think so. I'd be pretty surprised by that. Again, though, like what does Charlotte have to offer? Like who is the guy that they could go give? Like they're not giving up LaMelo, and that's the only guy you can really want. There's no way. I don't think anybody's trading for Miles Bridges right now. So, you know, from a talent perspective, I guess you could say that, but I don't see it personally.
Yeah, no.
Okay. That was exhaustive, and I think it was worth being exhaustive because I just don't see the deal out there personally for James Harden, which means I think that it is more likely.
Shout out to Spins. That's great.
Adam Spinella in the comments, are they waiting for the market to soften or will it just harden? God damn it, Adam. This is what I deal with. These are the messages that I get throughout my life from Adam almost every day. Like it's not just the podcast. This is what I get. Okay. I don't see it. I think they should go into the year with Harden and see what happens unless like some weird construction where they can get like Chris Paul and Norman Powell presents itself, or they can get DeMar DeRozan. And I don't see either of those deals happening. So I think go into the year with Harden.